Today's video is going to be a massive retrospective review for the entire Halloween universe. Yeah, not just the Halloween series, not just the Halloween franchise, but the Halloween universe. That means I'm covering every timeline and every alternate approach to the entire Halloween legacy. And this retrospective is covering Halloween, Halloween 2, Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers, Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers, Halloween H2O, 20 years later, Halloween Resurrection, Rob Zombie's Halloween, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, Halloween 2018, and Halloween Kills. That is 12 Halloween movies in one jam-packed review. And one last thing before we get started. You can check out my new horror novel, South of the Mason-Dixon, if you want to see my take on the horror genre. South of the Mason-Dixon, available from Hellbound Books. Links are down in the description. I'm throwing out plenty of criticism here, so it's only fair I put my money where my mouth is. You can pick up your own copy of my book in paperback or on Kindle. Again, links are down in the description. Let's get started with the original 1978 slasher classic Halloween. It's easy to think of the Halloween series as John Carpenter's baby, but he only directed the first movie. He never directed any of the sequels, though he did write Halloween 2 and contribute music to some of the other movies, and he's given producer credit on some of the sequels, though his actual involvement in the later movies is extremely limited. It's also important to give Deborah Hill her due credit as co-writer and producer. She's often overlooked. So much has been said of the original Halloween over the years that there's really no stone left unturned at this point. It's a deserved classic. It's not the first slasher, as some people like to erroneously claim, but it did help to cement the rules of the slasher genre, and it led to an ungodly wave of copycats and cheap cash-ins over the years. Halloween is a masterclass at working within your limited means. Certain scrappy, low-budget movies like El Mariachi, Clerks, and Halloween have a special kind of inspirational quality to them for those of us who love making movies, not just watching them. Jamie Lee Curtis is great in the lead role and really set the template for what the final girl trope of the genre would be for decades to come, following well in her mother's footsteps from Psycho as the new Scream Queen on the block. And of course, Dr. Loomis is a reference to the Loomis character in Psycho as well, so double Psycho action going on. Jamie Lee Curtis and the Laurie Strode character became something of an anchor for the series, a figure that could be returned to in order to bring back a little gravitas whenever the series started to lose its way. Donald Pleasance as Dr. Loomis is great as well. I mean, talk about bringing gravitas to a role. Pleasance plays the role with such heartfelt sincerity. He delivers monologues about the boogeyman as if it's Shakespeare. The guy was an absolute class act, and he and the character really got done dirty as the sequels progressed, but more on that later. Though he isn't on camera, another star of the show in my eyes is Dean Cundey. Cundey was Carpenter's go-to cinematographer for a time, and he shot many of Carpenter's best movies. The two were a cinematic dream team, and the fact that Cundey shot the first 3 Halloween movies is a big part of why Halloween 2 and 3 feel considerably more like John Carpenter movies than any of the sequels, despite the fact that Carpenter didn't direct either of those either. Carpenter's direction of Halloween is impeccable. The way he uses darkness, stillness, and silence is second to none. Plenty of copycat slashers came along and upped the gore and the number of kills and whatnot, but very few could ever even come close to reaching Carpenter's level of tension. He wrings so much suspense out of so little, again working masterfully with severely limited resources. I've known plenty of people who consider the original Halloween extremely dated and that it's too slow or even boring. But I don't think so at all. I say it's an absolute masterpiece that holds up perfectly. It's not as flashy as many entries in the slasher genre, but it is undoubtedly one of the best. A perfect 5-star rating for the original Halloween. On to Halloween 2. 3 years after the original Halloween in 1978, Halloween 2 hit theaters. Talk about being a direct sequel. Halloween 2 picks up exactly where the last one left off on the same night as the murders, so, Halloween night. Laurie's in the hospital, and Michael makes his way there in pursuit, and then pretty much the whole movie takes place within the hospital. It's a much more contained movie than the first one. Halloween 2 only manifested the way it did out of a contractual obligation. John Carpenter and Deborah Hill both wanted the Michael Myers story to be a one-and-done affair, but they were essentially forced to continue the story in the sequel or else face legal action from the studio and or have someone else take the property out of their hands and do whatever they wanted with it, which is essentially what ended up happening anyway, just a couple of movies later. Halloween 2 is the film that introduced the idea of Michael and Laurie being brother and sister. People often forget after so many sequels where them being siblings is canon, but that wasn't a part of the original Halloween. It's like how there's no Queen Alien in the original Alien. That came in Aliens. Maybe it's a bit divisive, but I think Michael Myers is a more threatening and frightening force of nature when he has no motive at all for his violent pursuit and murders. To me, the lack of any motive is pretty essential to the whole point of the original movie. So giving Michael a motive for the sequel in the form of a blood relation is a step in the wrong direction for me. And it's a step that remained canon for the vast majority of the other movies in the Halloween universe, even in H2O, which ignored a bunch of the sequels. The sibling bond remained canonical in that one. Aside from that change, I mostly like Halloween 2. If you thought the original Halloween was too slow or boring, then get a load of this one. The slow critique is one that I think actually kind of does apply to Halloween 2. It has its good moments, but also a metric ton of filler. It's extremely bare bones, and you can really feel them stretching to reach feature length with long drawn-out scenes of nothing meaningful happening. Rick Rosenthal took over directing duties, and he's no John Carpenter, let's just say that. Dean Cundy's cinematography is still strong, and there is tension to a point, but it gets lessened by the protraction at play. Halloween 2 is a much more bare bones and straightforward affair, which is a little surprising to say considering how extremely bare bones and straightforward the first movie already was. Halloween 2 almost blends into the sea of copycats that followed in the wake of Halloween more than feeling like a worthy follow-up. Jamie Lee Curtis doesn't have much to do this time around. She's also wearing a really bad wig the whole movie. But Loomis is still good at least, and the ending is great. Michael Myers is deader than disco by the end of this one, with both of his eyes shot out and his body left a burning crisp after a huge explosion. This was meant to kill him off for good, but of course that didn't stick. It was supposed to kill off Loomis too. I mean, he's the one who causes the huge explosion and is at the center of it. The guy should be blown into itty bitty little pieces.
It's time, Michael.
The whole point is that he's sacrificing himself to save Laurie and take out Michael, but then he's just back in the next sequel anyway. I mean, it's pretty ridiculous. He's at the center of this explosion, but they just give him like a little scar when he comes back in Halloween 4. Not buying it. In totality, Halloween 2 is okay. It's much better than some of the sequels, but it's also not that good. I mean, I'll give it 3 stars. It's worth a watch at least once if you're a fan of the original. Now we get to the black sheep of the franchise, Halloween 3's Season of the Witch. I'm sure a bunch of you are expecting me to shit on this movie and complain about how it's the only movie in the entire franchise without Michael Myers in it, but surprise, surprise, I fucking love this movie. The original idea was to turn the Halloween series into an anthology, with every movie being a different spooky story centered around the Halloween holiday. It's understandable why audiences were confused and upset by the lack of Michael Myers, though, after getting 2 movies with him as the villain. I can't help but wonder if the legacy of Halloween 3 would have fared much better if Season of the Witch came out as the second Halloween movie instead of the third, and if the series then continued on in anthology format. It might have bombed and been hated regardless, I have no idea. It's certainly not for everyone, but how fucking weird it gets is a huge part of why I love it. I've actually already talked about this movie a lot, so I'll keep it quick here, but definitely check out my Halloween 3 Deserves More Respect video to hear all my thoughts on that. 4 stars. Joe Bob says check it out. Actually, he doesn't. Joe Bob doesn't like this one.
I've got problems with this flick. 2 stars, and I'm being generous with the 2 stars.
Anyway, check out my video on Halloween 3. Halloween 4, The Return of Michael Myers. It's what the fans wanted. They wanted Michael Myers to come back. So yeah, Halloween 3 was a massive failure and marked a turning point for the series. The keys to the kingdom completely changed hands at this point, and this series returned to being entirely Michael Myers focused and entirely slasher focused. Halloween sees the return of Michael Myers, as the title suggests, but it also sees a return to the slasher genre after the radical departure of Season of the Witch. The absence of Dean Cundy as cinematographer from this point onward is impossible to miss. Every Halloween movie from 4 onward looks worse by differing degrees. 4 and 5 are way too bright at all times, especially when Michael's on screen. I don't know how they fucked this up, but the mask looks goofy as hell this time around. Honestly, the mask looks kind of shitty in almost all of the sequels. It looks great in the first movie, and that same mask was used in 2, where it's a little worse for wear, but it still looks pretty good. From 4 onward, they were constantly trying to replicate whatever magical process that Shatner mask from the original movie went through, and they were never able to make it look that good again. Halloween 2018 uses all the years that passed in between as a good excuse for why it looks different, but for every other sequel, you just have to deal with the mask looking at best a little worse than the original, and at worst, like in Halloween 4, you have to deal with Michael looking goofy as hell whenever he's just standing around in bright, direct light. It's a problem. There's even a single shot where the mask's hair completely changes colors, and I guess they thought they could get away with it, that no one would notice, but no way, it's impossible to miss. This one is a pretty standard slasher, but it's also pretty entertaining. For what it is, at least. Loomis being alive after literally exploding is pretty stupid, but once you accept that he somehow survived, he's fun to follow since we don't have Laurie involved anymore. I like how Loomis is much more unhinged in 4 than he was previously. It's a good development for the character, and Donald Pleasance sells it well. And speaking of Pleasance selling it, he really fucking sells the ending.
No! No!
Halloween 4 is pretty entertaining throughout, but it has a fantastic ending with the reveal of Jamie Lloyd following in Michael's footsteps as a child killer. Pleasance's reaction really drives home the shock value. It ends with a great cliffhanger that sets up the next sequel and an exciting direction that the future of the series could follow. All in all, Halloween 4 is a decent but bog-standard slasher. 3 stars. Halloween 5, The Revenge of Michael Myers, takes that excellent cliffhanger from the end of Halloween 4 and completely squanders it. Actually, doesn't just squander it, it undoes it entirely. And the movie only came out a year after the previous one, but it was already retconning the only interesting stuff and replacing it with absolute bullshit. The characters all suck this time, even returning Jamie Lloyd, because her interesting twist was stripped away from her, and now she's just got nothing going for her. Loomis is even more unhinged, and he does have a couple of fun moments, but he's mostly pushed too far in the wrong direction. Also, they make a huge deal out of being the first movie to unmask Michael Myers. And I mean, yeah, Michael gets a face reveal, but it's so poorly executed with like the single tear rolling down his eye and all that, as if that's anything that should be in the realm of happening in a Halloween movie. And they're also trying to make you forget that they already showed Michael's face way back in the first movie. The nerve to play this off as if it's breaking new ground is a little ridiculous. If we're going to be blunt, everything about 5 sucks ass. The new director, Dominique Otanan-Girard, is the worst the series has had so far by miles. You can find quotes of the guy saying he thinks the horror genre is stupid. And maybe don't make a horror movie, that asshole. Come on. And why would you even put the franchise in this pervert's hands? That's another thing with this movie. It's way pervier than the series ever was before. The director's a bigger creep than Michael Myers at this point. Halloween 5 also starts veering into the kind of cultish territory that gets furthered to an extreme in 6. And that's the biggest misstep possible. Fuck this one. 1 star. Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. And oh boy, I thought the last one was bad. I thought it would be hard for them to get any worse. But holy shit, The Curse of Michael Myers makes Halloween 5 look like a masterpiece in comparison. It's hard to even believe how bad this one is. It isn't just packed with stupid moments and bad, unbelievable choices, but it is poorly assembled on every level. The writing, directing, and editing are all offensively bad. I honestly think it's a little bit of a stretch to even call this one a movie. There are parts of The Curse of Michael Myers where you can be like, okay, I'm watching a movie, a really shitty movie, but a movie nonetheless. But then there are huge swaths of this thing that are completely incomprehensible. They make absolutely no sense. It's just a total mess of a production. I can't believe this movie was released. It's important to note that there are 2 drastically different cuts of the movie, and it's the only instance I know of where the director's cut is what hit theaters and home releases first, and the producer's cut is actually the improved cut that came later on. Usually the producers are the one who have final say on what hits theaters, and a slightly altered director's cut is what comes out later. Or the director just had final cut from the get-go and assembled the best version of the movie. The point is, producers' cuts never happen. And in this case, the producer's cut is the superior version of the movie. I think it says less about the competence of the producers and more about the total incompetence of the director. I also don't think the producer's cut really makes the movie all that much better. It's a tiny bit less incomprehensible, but it also strips the movie of its gore and it hurts the movie in other areas. It's not like some magical patch that fixed this disaster. It's awful either way. The best part of the movie, and its only decent moment, is one particular kill that ends with a pretty good exploding head gag. And the producer's cut neuters that moment, so it's not really worthwhile when it takes out the only good moment. This movie was meant to conclude the ongoing story of Jamie Lloyd from Halloween 4 and 5. 4 set up Jamie with an interesting trajectory, 5 squandered that potential, and Curse pretty much just casts her aside unceremoniously in favor of following a new member of the now suddenly much larger Strode family. Laurie still isn't here. Jamie Lee Curtis left the franchise a long time ago at this point, so now we're stuck with the previously unmentioned Kara Strode and her Strode parents, who were never in the picture before. I don't even know why it needs to be the same family. And Kara Strode is just a carbon copy of Laurie Strode on paper, except portrayed horribly by Marianne Hagen. She is bad, and the noises she makes when she's being attacked and strangled by Michael Myers are ridiculous. She's no Scream Queen, and she's certainly no Jamie Lee Curtis. Loomis is back, but it's downright shameful what they did to him here. Donald Pleasance passed away in the same year the movie was released and before it was really finished. Some accounts say he died during filming. Most sources say he'd passed away between shooting and when the production was about to go into reshoots. Regardless of which it was, it's clear that they didn't get all the footage they needed for him for the story to make any sense as far as his character is concerned. This is one area where the producer's cut improves things marginally, but still not all that much. The theatrical ending is just unforgivable. Loomis is absent for the entire climax. Then he's suddenly there with everyone as they're getting in the car to leave, but he goes, "There's something I need to take care of." And then this piece of shit movie has the gall to cut to some B-roll of the Michael Myers mask just sitting on the ground, and they reuse a sound effect of Loomis screaming, and that's supposed to be him dying.
Come with us.
No, I have a little business to attend to here.
That is the worst possible way to kill off the only important character left in the series. And it's just straight up disrespectful to Donald Pleasance's legacy. Oh yeah, and Paul Rudd is in this one. He's actually kind of the star in a shared lead position with Kara Strode. I went into this hoping that Paul Rudd would at least be enjoyable in his scenes, but nope. He's awful in this. I like Paul Rudd in general. I think he's funny and that he's a good actor, but it really shows how bad direction can make actors look far worse than they really are. And the same might apply to Marianne Hagen, to give her the benefit of the doubt, because nobody comes out of this thing looking good. Halloween 5 started introducing some of the culty stuff, but Curse is where it really gets pushed to the forefront, and it's all about the Thorn cult, which is something that shouldn't even be in this franchise. This movie explains that Michael Myers is a cult baby who was cursed with magic, and he's like a weapon of the cult, and or kind of working with them. It's so goddamn stupid. The entire idea at its most base level is misguided garbage. This is a shit backstory, and the cult stuff should never be considered canon for any Halloween fan. Pretend it doesn't exist. The editing throughout is the worst in the entire series, especially in the theatrical/director's cut, but it's not honestly all that much better in the producer's cut. It's bad to the point of being entirely incomprehensible at points, and it's also just god-awful in every little stylistic choice that they throw in there. The worst edited scene of the movie is the single worst scene out of the entire Halloween franchise, and it's just as bad as shit you'll see in the notoriously bad movies like Birdemic or A Neil Breen Joint. A cult guy is revealed in the bedroom inexplicably, then Kara leaps out the second floor window through the glass for no real reason. Then it cuts to black, And it fades back in with Loomis and Paul Rudd standing on the grass where Carl landed. And they murmur some ADR about how they were drugged and the cultists are gone now. I can't even properly put into words how bad this scene is. It's genuinely one of the worst movie scenes I have ever witnessed. You just have to see it to believe it. This one is so bad it should have killed the series. And it kind of did, because the next one was essentially a reboot. Curse of Michael Myers is fucking bullshit. 0 stars. Big fat goose egg stars. Halloween H2O 20 years later. After the abysmal 6th entry in the series, it was clear that a new approach was needed. H2O pretends the last couple of movies don't exist. For all intents and purposes, it's a direct follow-up to Halloween 2, picking up 20 years later, hence the title, which is just fucking stupid. Why are you gonna call this H2O? Yeah, okay, it's 20 years later, and the title starts with the letter H, I guess, but so fucking what? There is no reason to call this movie the chemical compound of water. Water has nothing to do with anything. And why is the number of years that passed part of the title anyway? This title is bullshit. We're not getting off on the right foot here. But let's set that aside. Since it's setting up a new canon and a new timeline, a back-to-basics approach makes sense. That's pretty much what the movie delivers. Jamie Lee Curtis is back in the lead role, which was a big selling point. It was also a big selling point in Halloween 2018, which they kind of tried to play it off like it was her first time returning since the original 2, but that's ignoring the fact that H2O exists and the fact that she's even in Resurrection. So it's not quite the selling point for the 2018 one that they tried to present it as. Also, H2O did a lot of the same ideas before 2018 could get to them. It doesn't do them particularly well, but it does them. Laurie is now a grown adult with a teenage son and a job in a private school. But she's still haunted by Michael Myers. She apparently faked her death as Laurie Strode and is now living under a fake name, which doesn't really seem necessary given the circumstances of what happened. And she also doesn't really seem to be hiding who she is or her feelings toward Halloween or anything, so I don't really get the point of all that. I guess it's to give a reason why it took 20 years for Michael Myers to track her down, but that's super contrived regardless. And I mean, can you really imagine Michael somehow searching for the name Laurie Strode and being stumped by that? Like, what is he supposed to be doing to find her? It's not like he's asking around or looking in the yellow pages or anything. I don't really get it. But yeah, well, I mean, whatever. Michael comes back 20 years later for what was marketed as the final showdown between Michael and Laurie. H2O promised definitive closure for the series. And to be fair, it did kind of deliver on that. Michael is the deadest he's ever been at the end. Laurie fully decapitates the motherfucker. So, I mean, that's some finality right there. Oh, except they immediately made another shitty cash-grabby sequel right after that and completely retconned everything again. But more on that later on. It really does hurt H2O, though, because it means the entire supposedly meaningful ending actually means nothing, and it's just a big charade. H2O isn't anywhere near as bad as the 2 directly before it. It's also nowhere near as good as the best in the series. The movie is mostly just dull for the majority of its runtime. It's all about the last act, that final 20 minutes or so where Laurie and Michael face off, and the entire rest of the movie is little more than blatant filler. The body count is artificially inflated, and there are a ton of boring side characters who don't need to be in the movie, like LL Cool J's annoying security guard character. That dude cannot act. Oh, and Joseph Gordon-Levitt is in this one as one of the teens who gets killed in the opening. It's pretty unremarkable, but whatever. He's in there. To give the movie its due, that last act is pretty entertaining. There's a lot of fun to be had in the violence of those last 20 minutes, and it's what makes the movie just barely worth watching, but the filler really does hurt it. It's extremely apparent that they only had about 20 to 30 minutes worth of an engaging story, and everything else is just there to pad out the runtime. It's just barely 90 minutes, and it still feels like you could chop the thing in half without affecting the plot at all. Steve Miner is in the director's chair this time, and he's not amazing or anything, but he's a huge step up from the last couple of directors this series had. Plus, he had a little bit of a horror pedigree, having already directed the first 2 Friday the 13th sequels, and some other, decent horror flicks. H2O is shot, lit, edited, and just generally presented much better than the last couple of Halloween movies, but it's still a world apart from the Dean Cundey shot movies. They made the choice to try to improve and iterate upon his classic music score by making it bigger, but that's such a misguided move. Adding more instruments to Carpenter's theme does not make it better. In fact, it makes it much, much worse. Now, instead of a simple, creepy, haunting melody, it sounds like there's an entire goddamn orchestra playing every time Michael does anything. One annoying thing about this one is that Michael is constantly posing in the background of shots for no reason, just so the audience can go, oh, there he is! And then he comically moves out of frame before the characters look over. It's stupid. There's no reason for him to be doing that. And the mask still doesn't look great. The eye holes aren't spaced properly for the actor wearing the mask, so he just looks goofy instead of scary. They also didn't seem to know how to light him this time. You can constantly see the actor's eyes underneath the mask, which if you go back and you look at the good entries in the series, you would realize that's completely wrong. You don't want to see eyes under the mask. You want to see nothing but darkness inside. The Rob Zombie and David Gordon Green movies remembered to get this right at least. But H2O just completely missed it. H2O was a big improvement over the abysmal Curse of Michael Myers, but it's still not particularly good. I'll give it 3 stars if I'm feeling generous. 2.5 if I'm not feeling that generous. It's not bad, but that's where it ends. Or at least, that's where the series should have ended. Halloween Resurrection is a movie that never should have existed. It retcons the ending of H2O in the most bullshit, contrived, cash-grabby way possible. And not even because they had another Michael Myers story worth telling, purely just to try to make another quick buck off of the name recognition. Resurrection is canon with H2O, but the explanation for how Michael supposedly survived being decapitated is just impossibly stupid. They even needed to add in a random nurse character who can dump pure exposition, and even then it doesn't make any sense. Supposedly Michael swapped clothes with a police officer and crushed the guy's larynx and put the mask on him so he couldn't talk, and that's who Laurie killed. And then Michael came back later and took the mask and put it on again. This explanation is just a total crock of shit, and it's so brain dead that it's not even worth explaining why it makes absolutely no sense. So I'm not gonna go there. Let's just move on. After the info dump, the prologue kills off Laurie Strode, aka the only character worth a damn left in this series. And her death, again, could not possibly be executed any worse. It's such a disservice to this character to kill her off so unceremoniously, as the movies open and kill, as if she's just nameless cannon fodder. They could probably only get Jamie Lee Curtis for a day of shooting, but she shouldn't have even done the day, because it's just awful. And the mechanics around her death are just pathetic. She has this stupid mechanical rope trap that lifts Michael upside down in the air. The whole thing is ridiculous. After Laurie's out of the picture, we're introduced to an entirely new cast of characters, and it's downright embarrassing that they think they can kill off Laurie and still expect you to care about any of these douchebags. And I do mean douchebags. These new characters all suck, bar none, every single one of them. From Busta Rhymes and Tyra Banks to whoever the fuck the rest of them are. They don't even really establish a main character. The one who turns out to be the final girl is indistinguishable from the rest of the cast. And what's worse is that this plot doesn't even have any business being a Halloween sequel. There's no reason for it to be connected to this franchise after that opening. Michael Myers going around killing people like usual because they're in his house this time, that's it. The plot could just as easily unfold in any other killer's house with any other killer. They killed off the only connective tissue to the series in the goddamn prologue, so who gives a shit what happens afterwards? Clearly the filmmakers didn't care. It's a little shocking to see that Rick Rosenthal came back to direct this one, having previously directed Halloween 2 way back in 1981, a full 21 years earlier. I don't know what happened to the guy in the interim, but he completely forgot how to put together a movie. This isn't just terribly written, it's horribly directed. The stylistic choices all suck ass, and the editing is, again, a total mess. It's almost as bad as Curse of Michael Myers, maybe not quite. It's not as incomprehensible, at least. There are also non-stop jump scares, and they are the worst of the worst bottom barrel jump scares. They went as far as to splice in single frames of Michael Myers as they blare the jump scare noise, even though he isn't there. That's some cheap bullshit manipulation right there. This one is also super pervy again, like Halloween 5. The camera is just constantly objectifying any woman on screen. There are the gratuitous nude scenes, of course, but even between, the camera is constantly zooming in on asses for no reason. It's not motivated, it's just zoom in on the ass when it's on screen. It's gross and embarrassing. This is a smaller issue, but one of the kills, which all the kills suck by the way, but one of the kills has Michael impaling the guy with a spiky tripod leg, which means the movie's trying to pretend that tripods have giant spikes on them, that they're essentially big swords that people mount cameras on. In case it needs saying, tripods don't have giant spikes on them. This is what a tripod leg looks like. They have these soft rubber feet on them, because of course they do. Why would a tripod have spikes on it? Why would you want your tripod scratching up every surface you put it on? Now, occasionally, you might get spiky tripod feet when you're shooting outdoors on an unstable surface, just to balance it out. But they're shooting inside in a house. It makes no sense, and it treats the audience like they're stupid. Despite this being the obligatory tech-focused entry that every horror franchise seems to have for some reason, which I complained about in my Scream series review. Despite Resurrection being the tech entry, it displays a blatant lack of understanding of how technology works. Any technology, but especially cell phones. According to this movie, text messages come in one letter at a time. And also, you can only receive text, you can't send them. Also, you can't make calls on a cell phone. You can't make them or receive them. You can only receive text one letter at a time. That's the only purpose of a cell phone. It's just stupid. Who's believing that? And there's a part where one of these texts comes in from a friend who's watching the house on camera, and the message says, "Don't scream," right? And the girl who reads it immediately screams. She screams at the text message, as if that's scary. As if the words "don't scream" coming from a friend are scary. She doesn't see Michael Myers and scream at him. She gets sent the warning by her friend, and that is what she's screaming about. It's so stupid. That level of unabashed stupid as a noun in that sentence, that level of unabashed stupid infects every moment of this movie. Like how once the killing gets started, the movie doesn't even bother trying to give a reason why they can't just leave the house. They just stay in the house. And even the kills suck. There's nothing redeeming about this movie.
Trick or treat, motherfucker.
Busta Rhymes kung fu kicking Michael Myers while making Bruce Lee noises is the single cringiest moment in the entire franchise.
Me? Huh? Fucker.
Fuck this movie. Again, 0 stars. It's not as incomprehensible as Curse was, but it's just as unbelievably bad. Goose Egg. Rob Zombie's Halloween. So the curse of Michael Myers killed the franchise and necessitated a reboot to end the series on a better note in the form of H2O, which then got its own unnecessary sequel, which killed the series again. What followed was the Halloween universe went dormant for 5 years, then came back with a remake of the original, starting completely from scratch with Rob Zombie's Halloween. I saw this one back when it first came out, and I absolutely hated it. I thought it was a disgrace to Carpenter's original movie, but to be fair, I hadn't seen Curse of Michael Myers or Halloween Resurrection at that point. After seeing just how bad those sequels got, and then rewatching Rob Zombie's Halloween, his remake no longer feels quite so sacrilegious. That line was crossed a long time ago. Watching it again now, this remake actually starts to feel like a breath of fresh air for the series. I don't hate this remake anymore, but I still don't like it either. It's not as bad as the worst sequels, but I still don't think it's worth watching for fans of the original. It's a mixed bag erring on the side of bad. I at least appreciate that Zombie is trying to do something different here. It doesn't feel like a shameless money-grubby horror remake just because that was the big craze at the time. It probably was a shameless money-grubby horror remake on the studio end, but I don't get that sense from Rob Zombie. I think he did have his own ideas for the property and a different angle on the story, and he did effectively put his own spin on it, so that is commendable, if nothing else. But I also get the sense that maybe Rob Zombie had the wrong takeaways from the original Halloween. I don't know if he just kind of misunderstood what was scary about the original film, or maybe he just wanted to take it in a different direction. But gone is the slow creeping and the atmosphere and the stalking, and it's all replaced with more in-your-face violence. It's definitely a gorier movie than the original, and there's way more nudity to the point of just being gratuitous and excessive. That's in the director's cut, at least that's the version I watched. But it's not like gore or any of that kind of stuff was the goal in the original movie, so outdoing it in that category It's like, so what? The kills are all pretty tame in that first movie, and they don't really have any bearing on why that film is so effective. The kills themselves aren't scary, it's the stuff that surrounds it and how those kills manifest. Rob Zombie's biggest shakeup is to add an extended prologue that focuses on the psychology of child Michael Myers and examine how he came to be the unstoppable killing machine that he ends up being. Laurie Strode doesn't even enter the movie until 55 minutes in. It's not that long of a movie, really. There's some interesting stuff in this extended prologue. It basically turns that iconic Steadicam opening from the original into a 25-minute mini slasher movie with child Michael Myers killing his now cartoonishly white trash family. What follows is an exploration into Michael's stint in the psychiatric hospital, complete with visits from Dr. Loomis, and a progression into Michael's eventually hollow state. Again, I appreciate Zombie doing something different with the material, but I think his efforts are mostly in vain and even a little misguided. Just like with the violence, I think Zombie kind of misunderstood what makes Michael Myers scary. His lack of motivation is what's frightening. The fact that a seemingly normal child from a seemingly normal family could become the boogeyman of pure evil, that's the core of the horror in the original Halloween. But Rob Zombie seems to miss that and instead go to great lengths to explain and justify why Michael is the way he is. It's a self-defeating goal that runs counter to the strengths of the original and makes this remake much worse as a result. Beyond that fatal flaw, everyone in the movie is just a total douchebag or cartoonishly evil, except for Danny Trejo. He's great and his death scene is probably the most effective in the movie. Also, I always like seeing Ken Foree and Brad Dourif too. But everyone else, Jesus, like the rapist guard guys, they are so far beyond the realm of believable. What even is supposed to be their goal with Michael? It's so contrived for them to get into his cell, and that's what sets the whole plot in motion and starts his killing spree. It's the linchpin of the entire plot, and it makes no sense. Even when they're supposed to be the good guys, like Laurie, everyone is still a douchebag. He made Laurie a douchebag, which I guess was maybe a product of the times. 2000s horror had this backwards thinking stint where they always made the characters in slash movies unbearable douchebags. It took more than a decade for them to realize that horror is more effective when you care about and like the characters. That should be pretty obvious. It was obvious to the audiences, not to the producers. Laurie's introductory scene is such a bad choice, and she's mostly just completely unlikable in both of Rob Zombie's movies. Loomis is pretty good, at least in this remake. Malcolm McDowell is a worthy choice to replace Donald Pleasence, and he does a good job. I cannot say the same about Loomis in the sequel, but we'll get to that shortly. It's interesting that Zombie chose to keep Michael and Laurie as brother and sister. That was info added in Halloween 2, but he brings it into his first Halloween movie. I think it was probably worth eliminating from the canon altogether when you're starting from scratch, since it's kind of dumb anyway and it hurts the lore in my opinion, but I guess Zombie liked that aspect of Michael's backstory and motivation. It's also interesting that he kept the Thing from Another World reference intact that's on the TVs that the kids watch. He could have easily replaced that with a different movie, a more modernized horror movie. Seems like a missed opportunity to me to not have it be John Carpenter's The Thing. That would have been perfect, everything coming full circle. One thing I do quite like about Rob Zombie's take on the property is the way that he presents Michael Myers physically. He casts former professional wrestler Tyler Mane as Michael Myers, and the dude is 6'9" and built like a brick shithouse. The sheer size of Michael Myers in this one is certainly intimidating, and Zombie presents him well. I don't really align with the intentions of the child Michael Myers stuff, but once he's an adult and he's got the mask on and he's in rampage mode, I like how Michael Myers is shot and utilized for the most part. I don't think he's creepy at all like he was in the original, but he is intimidating and threatening. The mask looks good too, I'll go ahead and say that. The mask looked bad in Halloween's 4 through 8. So it's nice that the remake fixed that issue at least. The action and violence is handled decently, but the shaky cam gets excessive at points, and everything feels rather gratuitous, not just in terms of gore or anything, but the big climax goes on for so long, it's just exhausting by the end. It's not thrilling, it's not scary, it's just grim and tiring. Final verdict is better than the worst sequels, but vastly inferior to the best sequels in the series. I can't go positive with it. But it's not as bad as I thought upon first watch. I'll give it 2 stars out of 5. Rob Zombie's Halloween 2. Rob Zombie's Halloween remake was successful enough that he got to make a follow-up. As odd as it sounds, he's one of the only people to direct more than one Halloween movie. Pretty much every sequel was helmed by a different filmmaker, except for Rick Rosenthal coming back 21 years later, and that didn't exactly work out. And then, of course, the new trilogy is all directed by David Gordon Green, so there's more cohesion there. RZ's Halloween 2 starts off feeling like a surprisingly faithful remake of the original Halloween 2, while I was expecting him to go off and make a follow-up that was entirely his own. To me, he has that leeway. I don't really care about him remaking Halloween 2. I'm seeing this as his Halloween 2, a sequel to his Halloween, not necessarily a remake of the actual Halloween 2. Now, this does end up changing after the opening act of the movie. The movie does eventually go its own direction, but that's after an extended mislead that was horribly handled. They seriously did the whole "it was all a dream" fake out thing. Like, are you kidding me? 2009 is way too late to be falling back on this garbage trope that was already cliched and rightfully maligned decades earlier. Octavia Spencer has a small role in the opening and gets killed by Myers. I was surprised to see her here, and I actually don't think she was very good. I think she's a really good actor in general, but between this and Ma, maybe she's not the best fit for the horror genre, I don't know. After the fake out, Zombie does take his sequel in a completely different direction from the original 2, which I appreciate. But also I disagree with pretty much every narrative choice that he did make. The weirdest part is that there's a big twist reveal moment about Laurie being Michael's sister, but did you forget that you already put that in the last movie? Like, how is that a twist? It's not new information. I get that it's news to Laurie and she can have an appropriately shocked reaction, but the movie plays it like it's supposed to be a shock to the audience too. I hate what Zombie did to Loomis in this one. It's not the same Loomis as the original movies, and I don't even think it's the same Loomis from Zombie's other Halloween movie, both in how he's written and even how Malcolm McDowell plays him this time. He turned Loomis into a big douchebag. Now he just blends into the sea of other douchebag characters that populates this movie. The basic idea of Loomis writing an exploitative cash grab book about Michael Myers that makes everyone angry is a misguided choice, I think. It belongs more in the Scream series, considering it's literally just turning Loomis into a less likable Gale Weathers. But at least in Scream, her writing is a key character trait and intrinsic to the plot. In Halloween 2, it's almost entirely out of place. The only impact it has on the plot is that it's how Laurie finds out she's Michael's sister. Otherwise, we're constantly getting scenes of Loomis on his book tour and doing promotion, and none of that has anything to do with anything. Brad Dourif is the only one I like on the cast this time, and he's still pretty good, but just like the sister revealed, they repeated the same beat of him finding his daughter all bloody after being attacked by Michael. Yeah, this time she's actually dead, but it's executed less emotionally than when she was alive in the previous movie. That doesn't really make sense. Zombie makes the stylistic choice to go all quiet and have Dourif escorted out of the house by another character, but what that does is strip away Dourif's ability to emote. You can't even see his face for most of this, the way that Zombie shoots it. It's from a top-down, omniscient sort of angle. You can't see the guy's eyes. How is he supposed to get across that emotion? That should be a heavy moment. This one gets experimental moments, which again, I want to give Rob Zombie some credit for trying something different, but also again, I think it's just really poorly handled. There's this sort of spiritual connection between Michael and his dead mother that is just like, why is that in this movie? Same for the white horse stuff. It's Twin Peaksy, I guess. Maybe it's even a reference, but it's so out of place in this movie, in Halloween. And then the moments of experimental shooting and editing, those come off as extremely amateurish. Those moments are shot and color graded like a dated music video, which is definitely in Zombie's wheelhouse, so that makes sense. And they're full of this cringy, fast, jerky movement thing. Maybe some people like that kind of thing, but the whole undercranked trick always annoys me in horror movies. Jacob's Ladder did it well, and no other movie ever needed to do that again. But yeah, it's all over the place, and it's in tons of horror movies. It's not like this is the only one that does it, and does it poorly. And the shaky cam might be even more excessive than Zombie's first movie, where it was already a significant problem. Yeah, this one's just, it's another step in the wrong direction. It's a little worse than Zombie's first at bat. 1.5 stars, I think is what I'll give it. Nowhere near as bad as Resurrection or Curse, though. Halloween 2018. After another period of dormancy, the Halloween series came back again in 2018 with a stupid fucking non-title. This one establishes yet another timeline. Now only the original 1978 Halloween is canon. None of the sequels exist in this movie's universe, which means Laurie and Michael are not brother and sister, which is a change I like. And I'll say I'm fine with this one, ignoring all the other sequels altogether. I don't think any of them really contribute anything worth keeping. Most of them make Michael less frightening by adding more and more convoluted bullshit to his backstory. But I've got a bone to pick with this title. The whole point is that it's a direct sequel to the original movie, which means you can't give it the same title as the original movie. How the fuck is that not just confusing? I shouldn't have to say the year for you to know what movie I'm talking about. It's not a remake, so I give it the same title. Okay, you don't want to call it Halloween 2 because it's already 2 Halloween 2s. Well, there's already 2 Halloweens too, so I don't see how that's any more preferable. At least put some kind of subtitle on it. I mean, as much as I think H2O's title is stupid, even that's better than just calling it Halloween again. Call it that. Call it Halloween Again. Put that in the title. It's Halloween Again. How about that? The sequel to Halloween cannot be Halloween. God damn it. The Scream franchise did it too, calling the 5th movie just Scream. Let that stupid trend die. But okay, on to the actual movie. I think I would mostly call 2018 a return to form. But return might not be the right word to use since it doesn't really feel anything like the original Halloween. It's got a completely different tone, which is far more comedic. And not even darkly comedic really, but just like openly comedic. The comedy's not unexpected because you've got David Gordon Green directing and him and Danny McBride writing the script, who have both made a lot of comedy properties together. Some of the humor is okay, but it's also one of my biggest issues with this movie, which is that there are extended comedic vignettes afforded to characters who immediately get killed off afterwards. I don't need those. Get rid of them. I think the idea is to develop the people who get killed so they aren't just cannon fodder, but I don't think it really works. It just makes all that banter between father and son about dancing, or the banter between cops about sandwiches or whatever, feel completely unnecessary, like material that should be cut. It's too late to characterize and develop someone when they get killed off at the end of the same scene. That's pretty lazy, don't you think? I mean, you gotta do that kind of thing earlier and really develop a character. This is just hollow pseudo character development, not the real deal, because these people are still just cannon fodder. They made a huge deal about Jamie Lee Curtis coming back as Laurie Strode, definitely intentionally pretending like she hadn't already come back to the series multiple times before, but still it's good to have her back, and she's pretty well utilized this time. They do interesting things with her character, but honestly they are retreading a lot of the ideas that H2O already explored, though admittedly 2018 does those ideas much better. It kind of feels like a remake of H2O in some regards, not all. The final showdown between Laurie and Michael is great. It's a real crowd pleaser sequence. I saw Halloween 2018 in the theater right when it came out, and I really enjoyed it. On subsequent rewatch, however, I enjoyed it far less. This is a movie where the cracks really start to show on rewatch, which is something that doesn't really hurt any of the other movies. Except for Curse and Resurrection and Zombies Halloween 2, I've seen all of these movies more than once, and subsequent watches didn't hurt any of the others the way that it hurts 2018. I think the direct reason for this is that there's so much shit in this movie that doesn't belong in the movie. On a first watch, you expect these things to become relevant by the end, and then the climax is so crowd-pleasing that you forget about those dropped elements once the credits roll. On rewatch, I was constantly going, oh yeah, there's this cowboy law enforcement guy. Why is he even in this? They don't pay him off or do anything with him. It feels like there's a lot of junk that either should have been cut out of the movie or that is just there to introduce stuff for later on in David Gordon Green's trilogy without having a purpose in this movie, which I think is a problem. And maybe I shouldn't even call it a trilogy since the original Halloween is still canon, so I guess it's more like a quadrilogy with a huge gap in it. I don't know. The worst part of this one is the insane doctor character. That guy sucks, and everything with his character falls completely flat for me. There's no Loomis in this one, but this guy is so obviously a Loomis surrogate as a psychiatrist with a personal obsession with Michael, except he's evil now. And I don't believe his particular brand of craziness. I find everything this guy does completely unbelievable, and it seems to me like he's in this movie on a plot level just to contrive a way to get Michael back to Laurie, since he doesn't really have any reason to go after her in particular without the sister connection. This doctor character doesn't work for me at all. But now for some positives. I think it's quite well shot, and there's a great Steadicam shot that feels like it pays homage to the Steadicam opening of the original while doing something completely new. Darkness is well utilized, and Michael Myers is effectively intimidating. The kills feel brutal without being too over the top for the most part. The new characters of Laurie's family's 2 generation downs are okay, I think it would have been better to take some of that extended screen time away from the copious supporting characters and give more of it to Laurie's family. They could have used more character development. But they're not bad, they just don't leave too much of an impression. And definitely not to the extent that Laurie does. The music is great in this one. They used the original theme well, and it was a great choice to bring John Carpenter back to create some more new original music. Carpenter doesn't get enough credit as a composer and general musician. His music does wonders, and hearing his new tracks was one of the highlights of the movie for me. I also liked how Halloween 2018 handled movie references. There are obvious callbacks to the original, like when Laurie does Michael's disappearing act on him, but there are also references to the likes of Halloween 3, Repo Man, and even the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, I think. And they're tastefully done. It doesn't have any scary or creepy quality to it, really, but it is a lot of fun. Even with those pretty significant flaws, I think this is easily one of the best entries in the Halloween series. I'd give it 3.5 stars, I think. It was closer to a 4 my first watch, but 3.5 is still good. And finally, Halloween Kills. After enjoying Halloween 2018 a lot, I was really excited for Halloween Kills, and I was in for a rude awakening. All the positive steps for the series that came in David Gordon Green's first spin in the director's chair are undone in Halloween Kills. I did not like this one bit. It is such a step backwards and a complete mess of a screenplay. The execution is about the same as the last movie, visually speaking, but the story sucks, and the themes it's trying to jam in here about herd mentality and vigilante justice and whatnot are fumbled horribly, and they come off as obnoxious more than anything. I seriously disliked the whole portion of the movie with the mob in the hospital trying to murder the innocent guy and getting him to kill himself. I get the thematic intent there, but I don't like it at all. And the execution is completely unbelievable. There's no chance in hell all these people would think this guy is Michael Myers. There's just no chance. The whole confusion and chaos that leads to this isn't believable in the slightest. The constant "evil dies tonight" chanting is so obnoxious. They want it to be a catchphrase for the movie in addition to being the tagline, and it's like, evil doesn't even die tonight. You announced there was going to be a third movie, Halloween Ends, before this one was even out. So obviously there's no finality in anything. And maybe that's part of the problem with this one. I think Halloween Kills does suffer from the middle film slump thing. The David Gordon Green trilogy could still start and end strong, but maybe this one's like filler. You know, Laurie doesn't really have anything to do in this one. She spends pretty much the whole movie stuck in a hospital bed, which limits her even more than in Halloween 2. I like Judy Greer a lot in general, but her character is annoying in this one, and so is pretty much the entire rest of the cast. That issue of spending a weirdly long time with the cannon fodder before killing them is even worse in this one. Why am I supposed to give a shit about this old guy playing with a drone in his house for so long? It doesn't make his death any more meaningful. I appreciate the intent behind it, but this protracted, goofy introduction doesn't make this guy a real character. He's still just a body for Michael to cut up. The cast of fully fledged characters doesn't have many expendable bodies amongst it, so all these random people need to get introduced just to have a body count. And that's all these side characters feel like, contributions to the body count. The highlight of this one for me was actually just the opening, because it was a fun surprise to see Jim Cummings in there. I didn't know he was in it. That was a fun surprise. I love that guy. Great actor, great filmmaker. I didn't really like anything else about this movie, really. Some of the kills are entertaining, I will say. It's mostly well made from a filmmaking level. It's shot and edited way, way, way better than, the other sequels in the series. So I give it credit there. But the script is a mess. I could give it 2 stars from being generous, but I don't know. I find myself drifting more towards 1.5 star territory, honestly. This one almost even hurts Halloween 2018 a little bit too, now that we know that this is what it was leading to. 2018 could have been standalone. Turning it into a new trilogy, I don't know, maybe not the right move. Like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I'm shooting this before Halloween Ends is out, but look below for my updated thoughts on that once I do see it. So here's my official ranking for all 12 movies in the franchise so far. Halloween 1978. Halloween 3, yeah, fuck you, Halloween 3 rules. Halloween 2018, though this is subject to change, my score might drop even further a little bit on this one after another rewatch, or depending on how Halloween Ends goes. Then Halloween 2, the original Halloween 2. Then I think Halloween 4, then Halloween H2O, then Rob Zombie's Halloween, then Halloween Kills, Rob Zombie's Halloween 2, Halloween 5, Halloween Resurrection, and Halloween, The Curse of Michael Myers. It's a very messy series. Out of these 12 movies, it's really only the top 3 that I would recommend to most people, and only the original 3 that I can recommend with a great deal of enthusiasm. There is at least entertainment value in most of these movies, but definitely avoid the bottom 3 on this list altogether. They aren't even worth a watch for diehard fans or for like the curiosity of it all. They're just plain awful. And thanks for watching this gigantic Halloween universe retrospective. I did the same thing for Scream, which you can check out with the link that's on screen right now. And if you want more horror content, I have a metric shit ton of horror coverage in this year's Macabre Month of Horror and in all the other Macabre Month of Horror playlists that you can dig into. So subscribe, stick around if you like stuff like this, and happy Halloween, everyone.